Hello and welcome to News Central Studios. I'm Felicity Ezewike here with the stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin in North America, where U.S. President Joe Biden says a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas is closer than it's ever been. However, speaking at the White House, the U.S. president cautioned that an agreement was not there yet. Following 2 days of talks in Doha, Qatar, senior officials made positive noises about the direction of negotiations. Negotiators are due to reconvene in Cairo, Egypt, next week to try and finalize the deal. Recall that Biden had previously voiced hope that a deal might be achieved, but the parties' negotiations have broken down. The deal will see the release of hostages held since October 7 attacks on southern Israel, in which more than 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 taken hostage.
And we are closer than we've ever been. I don't want to jinx anything, but as my grandfather said, with the grace of God, good little neighbors, a lot of luck, we may have something. But we're not there yet. But it's much, much closer than it was 3 days ago. So keep your fingers crossed. Thank you.
We will be reaching out to our international correspondent on that story. We'll come back to it in a bit. But let's also tell you now that in Gaza, officials say 41 Palestinian civilians who suffered various injuries in the war in Gaza have been flown to Malaysia on Friday for treatment. Palestinians aged 8 months to 62 years were transported from Cairo to the majority Muslim nation via Malaysian Air Force transport aircraft. Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel led to 1,198 deaths and 251 hostages, with 39 Israeli military confirmed dead. Some were freed during a one-week truce in November. The war has displaced almost the entire population of Gaza and destroyed much of its housing and other infrastructure, leaving widespread shortages of food.
Kita melakukan misi kemanusiaan ni atas pertimbangan kemanusiaan. Semata-mata atas pertimbangan kemanusiaan dan untuk kita menunjukkan solidariti kita terhadap apa yang berlaku terhadap rakyat Palestin, dan ia juga adalah sebagai satu pendirian negara. Kita menentang tindakan yang kita anggap sebagai satu tindakan tidak peri kemanusiaan, genosid dan sebagainya. Setelah ditapis dan setelah dipastikan yang terlibat itu ianya layak untuk terbang, fit to fly, maka kita telah kenal pasti seramai 41 orang pesakit, terdiri daripada 20 lelaki, 21 perempuan, umur daripada 8 bulan.
For more on the ongoing negotiations for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, I'm joined now by News Central's international correspondent, Afia Hagan. Afia, thank you for joining us. What could be in this ceasefire deal if it materialized next week?
We could see the release of hostages held since the 7th of October. More than 250 hostages were taken. About half of those have been released, and as for the hostages that are still in captivity, we will assume that some of those people have died, and the others frankly need to be rounded up because they are scattered all through Gaza. Some of them are held by the Palestinian Liberation Front, some of them held by Hamas, but it will be about the release of those hostages. And a joint statement from the White House, from Egypt and Qatar described talks as serious and constructive and conducted in a positive atmosphere. Senior officials from the government will convene in Cairo before the end of next week with the aim to conclude the deal with the terms that were put forward per day. That's what officials are saying.
There's been a significant push to a deal this week. How have we got to this point?
Yeah, there's been a huge push for a deal this week, probably the biggest push that we have seen. And part of that is because the risk of this war spilling into other parts of the Middle East region because the threat of Iran, the threat that Iran poses to Israel. So you have the UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and the French Foreign Minister, Stéphane Séjourné, and they joined the Israeli Foreign Minister, as well as representatives from the US at those talks in Qatar. Now, there's cautious optimism, very cautious optimism for these talks. Now, technical talks could resume over the weekend. That's with your kind of low-level staff, with senior officials reconvening in Cairo next week, so moving from Doha in Qatar to Cairo. But the question of what happens over the weekend is a pertinent one, because often events, bombings of hospitals and schools outrage Hamas and outrage one side. And so it could mean that these talks are pushed back. A lot of people saying, why couldn't we have done this deal today? Because events over the weekend could mean that perhaps we take a step back. The hope is that with technical talks by low-level staff continuing over the weekend, that nothing else will happen over the weekend, even though you have 130 people dying a day in this war, that there isn't too much of a catastrophe if 130 people dying isn't a catastrophe enough, that will put the talks back next week.
Hamas said it wouldn't take part in the negotiation talks. So how could this ceasefire deal be reached without them?
Well, yes, Hamas said that they wouldn't be attending the ceasefire talks that take place in Doha in Qatar. But we have to remember that Doha is sort of the HQ for Hamas, for their administrative, for their political side. So even though they weren't at the talks, even though they weren't in the room, they will certainly have been informed about those conversations. So they were in the room, and in one way or another, there's no way that these talks could go ahead without them knowing what is being said. Now, it's thought that this ceasefire is based on a deal that was put forward by the US on May the 31st. Each side has come with their amendments, but we've got to this point because we had the basis of the deal and because Hamas have been informed at every stage. And so we'll have worked with their people and Israel have worked with their people on their amendments, meaning that even though Hamas weren't in the room, they were certainly informed of what was going on. And that's why we are perhaps closer than we have ever been to a ceasefire deal in this war.
Afia, thank you for speaking with us. Away from that, to the coming US elections, where Donald Trump has been left bitter, disoriented, and mourning the loss of the old campaign, the one he was winning against President Joe Biden. Trump's confusion was laid bare in a self-pitying and raging stream of consciousness delivered at his New Jersey golf club that raised serious questions about the future trajectory of his quest to return to power. For News Central, Afia Hagen has more.
Former President Donald Trump on Thursday repeatedly demeaned opponent Vice President Kamala Harris, calling her barely competent, and expressed his anger at her during a rambling press conference in New Jersey.
I'm very angry at her because of what she's done to the country. I'm very angry at her that she'd weaponized the justice system against me and other people. Very angry at her. I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president. And I think it's very important that we win.
Over about an hour, the former president fielded a variety of questions and swerved into familiar talking points, from criticizing Democrats over immigration and the economy to a rant accusing the party of conspiring against President Joe Biden. He insisted that his campaign strategy is unchanged now that Harris is his opponent, and said he preferred running against her, at one point speculating that his performance with white male voters would go through the roof. The Harris campaign is relishing the spectacle of Trump's almost daily meltdowns. After the New Jersey appearance, the vice president's team released what it said was a statement on Trump's whatever that was.
I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president.
Harris and Walz remain focused on their plans to boost the US economy. Vice President Kamala Harris plans to announce on Friday what her campaign is describing as a 4-year plan to lower housing costs, including $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time homeowners and actions aimed at spurring the construction of new housing, including tax incentives for building starter homes. Going into the Democratic National Convention next week, Harris now has a 2.7-point lead over Trump in the latest average of national polls, collated by 538. Republicans are attempting to downplay Harris's growing lead as a honeymoon phase, but it's clear that the Democratic candidate has maintained her momentum since entering the presidential race. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
Let's head to South America, where Prince Harry and his wife, American actress Meghan Markle, are visiting Colombia at the invitation of Vice President Francia Marquez, with whom they will attend various meetings with women and young people to reject discrimination and cyberbullying. Marquez emphasized the visit of King Charles III's youngest son to raise awareness and address cyberbullying, violence and discrimination in digital environments. The agenda indicates that they will then attend a university forum on responsible digital future.
And for me, the most important place that I sit in the world right now is as a mother. So I look at it through the lens of what my children, our children, are going to adopt as they get older, and how we can keep them safe, because I do believe all of us agree, despite whatever disparities there are throughout the world, no one contests the fact that we want to keep our children safe. And I think, as we continue with this work, we continue learning and investing and grant giving to young adults who can be change makers and are being change makers in this space. A lot of it.
One of my biggest worries is that for as long as social media is the way that it is, we will forever be divided, because we're no longer arguing over facts. We're debating and arguing over misinterpreted information. We're being misled. We're misleading each other, and we're being misled at the same time. Myself and my wife, we believe that information integrity is a fundamental right. And for as long as people are allowed to spread lies, to abuse, to harass without consequence, then social cohesion as we know it is completely broken down.
Les recibimos con los brazos abiertos durante estos días que estaremos visitando territorios, dialogando con niños, con jóvenes, con mujeres, con líderes.
To Asia, where we understand that thousands of protesters have marched through the streets of Kolkata on Friday, demanding justice after the rape and murder of a doctor, which has sparked nationwide outrage. Doctors have also intensified their own protests and strikes on Friday in solidarity with the enraged citizens of India, with protests and rallies also held in the capital, New Delhi, and other cities over the brutal killing. The Indian Medical Association, the country's largest grouping of doctors, has announced a nationwide strike of non-emergency services on Saturday. The discovery of the 31-year-old's bloodied body on August 9 at a state-run hospital in the eastern city of Kolkata had sparked nationwide protests. Head of the Electoral Commission says Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir is set to hold local elections for the first time in a decade after polls were stalled in the disputed region following New Delhi's imposition of direct rule in 2019. Voting for the region's assembly will be staggered over 3 stages between September 18 and October 1. According to the Commission, a total of 8.7 million people will be eligible to vote. Ballots from around the region will be counted all at once on October 4 and will be announced on the same day.
Elections in J&K will be held in 3 phases. So this is a shorter period. This is a much shorter period, much shorter than even the parliamentary elections, which were 5. 20th of August, just the next day of the Amarnath Yatra being complete, the 19th, would be the date of notification for the first phase. Nominations till 27th, scrutiny on the next day, 28th, and date of poll will be 18th of September, and it's a Wednesday. Second phase would be on 29th of August, and the statutory period of nominations and all, poll being on 25th of September. And phase 3, nomination on 5th of September, and every voting finishing on 1st of October.
We're on a short break now. We have more stories when we return. Do stay with us. Thailand's parliament has picked Paetongtarn Shinawatra, the daughter of billionaire tycoon and former leader Thaksin, as prime minister. The 37-year-old will be the country's youngest PM and the second woman in the post after her aunt, Yingluck. Her selection comes just 2 days after former Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin was dismissed by a constitutional court. Both are from the same party, which came second at the 2023 election but formed a ruling coalition. Ms. Paetongtarn faces the difficult task of reviving Thailand's stalled economy and avoiding the military coups and court interventions which have deposed 4 previous administrations led by her party.
แน่นอนค่ะต้องกราบขอบคุณพรรคร่วมทุกท่านด้วยนะคะสำหรับการสนับสนุนนี้ค่ะแน่นอนค่ะว่าดิฉันก็จะทำทุกอย่างให้เต็มความสามารถนะคะแล้วก็รอดูกันอีกทีให้เป็นทางการนะคะแล้วก็ผลักดันประเทศต่อดิฉันเองมั่นใจในพรรคเพื่อไทยมั่นใจในพรรคร่วมรัฐบาลทุกพรรคที่จะช่วยกันนะคะนำพาประเทศของเราให้หลุดพ้นจากวิกฤตเศรษฐกิจค่ะแล้วก็คุณเศรษฐาเป็นคนสนับสนุน ให้ดิฉันเขาเรียกว่าอะไรมีการได้รับการเสนอชื่ออะไรอย่างนี้นะคะก็อย่างที่บอกไว้นะคะว่าเราเคารพตัวดิฉันเองนี่เคารพคุณเศรษฐามาอยู่แล้วนะคะแล้วก็
Let's also tell you that the UN says the security forces in Bangladesh made unnecessary and disproportionate use of force during the unrest that led to the resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. According to UN Human Rights Office spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani, there is compelling evidence that the security personnel used excessive and unnecessary force in response to the incident, which justifies further independent examination.
Violations and abuse. All those responsible for human rights violations, including those who used or ordered unnecessary and disproportionate use of force, must be held to account, and victims must be provided with reparations and effective remedies. A comprehensive, impartial, and transparent investigation into all human rights violations and abuses that have occurred will be a critical first step. These initially peaceful student protests were followed by violence and
Pakistan officials say bullet-ridden bodies of 5 people have been found hanging from an electric pole in southwestern Pakistan on Friday. The bodies were discovered in the morning near a college in Dalbadin City, close to the borders with Afghanistan and Iran in Balochistan province, where Islamist and separatist militant groups have waged a long and bloody insurgency. Atik Shawani, a senior government official in the area, said they have been shifted to a local hospital. Doctors have ascertained that the cause of death is multiple bullet wounds, mostly to the chest. According to him, the men were likely killed on Thursday. He adds that no missing persons reports were registered with local police and the men have not yet been identified. And that's all at this hour. Do send us your eyewitness report to the number that will be displayed shortly on your screen. That's it. You can also follow us on social media at News Central TV to do so. You can watch News Central TV live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'll see you later.